We do not know exactly how civilizations first appeared. Once some civilizations were already in existence, they then tended to pass on to other areas knowledge and skills, which made it easier for civilization to appear in them too. No one now believes, as some scholars once did, that everything we think of as fundamental to civilization was invented first in one place, and was then passed on, so as to start up new civilizations elsewhere. Although there may have been slight contacts between some of them, it seems that civilization was invented, or occurred, whichever is the right word, in at least 6 places which were for a very long time for all practical purposes independent of one another. Sumerian or Mesopotamian civilization was the oldest. It was established by about 3500 BC. Soon afterwards, another civilization appeared in the Near East, that of ancient Egypt. Another flourished in India by about 2500 BC, but one in Crete, whose shape first became clear in about 2000 BC, may have overlapped with it in time. China had her first civilization by about 1500 BC. The only other example we need consider of a civilization appearing quite independently was in Central America. This was much later still, probably in about 800 BC. There is an obvious question. What did the areas in which these first civilizations appeared have in common? Do they explain why things took the turn they did there and not elsewhere? As the map shows, they were scattered all round the world's northern hemisphere. They were not to be found either in the coldest or hottest regions. 6,000 to 7,000 years ago, too, the climate was milder and wetter in the Near East than it is now, and the northwest corner of India was not then the desert much of it is today, but was wooded and green. 4 of these areas, too, were great river valleys. Mesopotamia, the Nile, the Indus, and the Yellow River valleys all had rich soil, easily worked. These were areas where agriculture was easy, and population could grow fairly rapidly. This is probably, it is best not to be too definite, the main reason why civilization appears first in these places. Gradually, in the right agricultural setting, numbers of little villages built up into bigger units, small towns, which made men think of more complicated and large-scale ways of doing things. Once they found suitable food crops for the climate, as they did, the Indian peoples of Central America could multiply on the rich soils of their semi-tropical forests, too. Only Crete seems not to have had the advantage of rich agricultural land. But the Cretans had other advantages: a fine central position in a sea of islands, with access to the great civilizations of the Near East and Egypt. The appearance of the later civilizations is much less difficult to explain than that of the earliest ones. From Mesopotamia, for example, influences spread outwards, which produced civilizations which had a lot in common all over the Near East by 1000 BC. Indian civilization eventually had a sphere of influence covering Asia and Indonesia, while Chinese civilization came to dominate a huge area in the Far East. The Central American civilizations, on the other hand, remained confined by geography. They could not penetrate the barriers it imposed on them. Yet for a long time, only a small area was really covered by any of the first civilizations. They existed for hundreds of years, without much influence on one another. The isolation of the Central Americans from other civilized regions was simply the most complete. Sheer muscle power was all that the ancient engineer could call on for his greatest works. This 19th century drawing of an Egyptian stone carving shows how a huge statue was moved from the quarry where it had been carved. No cart could carry it, because no axle could be made strong enough. It had to be dragged on a sledge. In the next episode, we will be looking at the later Sumer civilization. Follow us not to miss this interesting transformation of the world.